So, okay. So hello everyone. This is again João Vitor, and welcome to another episode of LangBytes, your podcast about computational linguistics. And in today's video, we have the privilege of talking to Dylan Elliott. He's a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Linguistics Department. Um, he's the current AI specialist at Right Label. In his current position, he researches developments in NLP and AI that might be beneficial for Right Label and its creative writers. He also manages a lot of different features of the AI offerings and tests ways in which it could be improved. In the past, he has worked as a computational linguist for Megaputer Intelligence,
Mhm.
and his research previously focused on methods for automatic error correction. And on a little bit on a personal note, he's a lover of linguistics and technology. And in his free time, he likes to spend time in the great outdoors, plays video games, and reads frequently about history. So a lot of stuff. So Dylan, again, thank you for coming and thank you for accepting. And I'm sure everybody will love our chat today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, yeah, very thrilled to just speak with you about the field, everything. Yeah.
Okay, great. So as usual, we are going to go first to our random question. And your random question is, what is your favorite movie and why?
That's a good one. Yeah, I thought a lot about this. So uh, my favorite movie would probably have to be the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Oh,
It's a period piece, so it's a period piece, but it takes place in like 1920s United States in the South, and it is actually based. The director based the movie off of Homer's The Odyssey, I believe. So it's sort of like an epic adventure tale
mhm.
of these three escaped convicts, and not to give anything away, but a lot of just crazy things happen. It's very cool for someone who likes history like I do. It's a really fun movie. It's also got oh shoot, what is his name? Um, his, his name has escaped me. The famous
Uh-huh.
actor that is now George Clooney. George
Okay.
Clooney. George Clooney. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So now, guys, you have a suggestion for a movie. Okay, so now let's move on to our chat about computational linguistics. And the first one is kind of um, it is a usual question that I make to the guests. Can you tell us about your journey from earning a degree in linguistics to becoming a computational linguistics and what inspired this transition?
Sure. Yeah. It was yeah, it's quite a story, I guess. So my background is in the humanities more. So I studied English and Spanish in undergraduate. And my purpose, at least in my studies as an undergraduate, was to be a journalist. I really enjoyed journalism. I enjoyed writing a lot, just language and books and such. And I was a big fan of like, the whole the Lost Generation writers, like, Ernest Hemingway and Fitzgerald and those people. Um, and many of them were like journalists and stuff like that. That seemed like a really cool thing to do. So I started down that path. All my credits were in that sort of vein, the more journalistic professional writing type credits. And I realized along the way, after having a few internships and doing a little bit of freelance work as a journalist, that journalism is very hard. And it's to be a good journalist, you really have to be very, very dedicated to the field. I think it is, and you can. It's just difficult. It can be. I sort of just like fell out of love with the idea, I guess. And I was having this discussion with one of my advisors, and I mentioned, and he saw, I was like, "Oh, I see you've taken like a few linguistics classes," which is something that I did, as like I just was always really interested in like accents and dialects and things like that, like the social linguistic element of that. So I took a lot of classes
Mhm.
there. I never considered it as like a career. It was just more like passion or interest. I come from a community in the South, like with Southern accents, everything like that. That sort of thing was always really interesting to me, and so I mentioned that to him, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I like linguistics, but I don't know if I can do anything with that. And that's when he told me about NLP. He was like, you should really look into this. Like computational linguistics is a big version, it's a budgeting field right now. And I really think in the future, it will be very important and a really interesting thing to um, to uh, to go into.
Mhm.
And the more and like this was the first time I'd ever heard of it, right? Like the
So
first
that
time I'd ever heard of computational linguistics, NLP, and I just started down, reading about it, and I was like, wow, this sounds so cool. This sounds awesome. Like I don't know, making robots talk and making machine translation. That's awesome. So yeah, that's how it started. Some things happened in between. I went to Spain a little bit, and to practice my Spanish. I started taking a lot of computer science classes, a lot of programming classes to build up, that side of the resume that I was lacking, that STEM side. And yeah, I decided to go back to grad school and just submitted some applications, got into UNC, and the rest is history. So
congratulations. Um, did you have any kind of specific computational linguistics courses on the linguistic department, or did you have to go to the computer science or other departments at your university?
yeah, so in undergrad, I had no like computational linguistics courses. But in grad school, I did. So in grad school, our linguistics department had started this certificate of computational linguistics, and they started tailoring a lot more of their courses towards computational linguistics. They started doing a lot more of that work. Um, and it was a perfect time for me to go there because they were just starting these things. And a lot of those courses were either in the computer science department with machine learning and stuff like that, or they were, more actual computational linguistics courses, things like tokenization, that type of thing. We use a lot of the um, um, NLTK toolkit. I did a lot of work in other classes as well whenever possible. If I was in like a syntax class or a phonology class, I would tie in computational linguistics with it. I would,
Mhm,
pick projects and do things like, you know, find ways to make a system that can count syllables or something like that from scratch, that kind of thing. Um, and yeah, just every opportunity that I had, I tied it back to my actual research interest, and I
mhm,
had a very supportive department. I was supportive of that kind of move. UNC
mm,
in the linguistics department, they do a really they did a really good job of, I would say, encouraging people to follow their research interest, and
mm.
especially mine with computational linguistics. So.
Nice. So you would make the courses computational linguistics, right?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And I think, especially for people, because I mean, like relatively speaking, compared to other like academic disciplines, like computational linguistics is pretty like as its own field is pretty young. So, and in academia, like the course structure, I don't know how it is in Brazil, but in the States, like it can take a while for that to catch up. So yeah, any way that I could tie it back into what I actually wanted to do, I think I took those opportunities, and
Mhm.
it really paid off for me. So
That's great. That's great. So that's also some kind of a tip we can give to the viewers. At
exactly,
your university, if there isn't any kind of computational linguistic course or workshop, you can make it as your own. Like if you have to hand in a final paper, a final term paper, then you can make it as computational linguistics as you want.
exactly.
That's good. Now let's talk a little bit more about your professional life. So currently you are AI specialist. So we would like to know what are some of the key responsibilities and projects you are involved in that relate to computational linguistics in that role.
Yeah, yeah. So um, yeah, the work that we're doing at Right Label has been very fun. It's been really interesting to get to work in these kind of things. So mostly what I do, as I think you did a good job summing it up at the beginning, like I do a lot of research, seek out technologies or methods that might be useful for the company and their creatives and stuff like that. And I have to be careful about, getting too much of the details.
Yeah.
I don't want to, say something trade secrets or whatever. But it is a lot of like research. It is a lot of like interacting as well with people. Not a lot of people, especially nowadays with like this AI boom that we're in,
Mm,
truly understand things like large language models and what they are. To a lot of people, it can seem, you know, might as well be. So that's a big part of the job as well. Like sort of guiding people through it, what these technologies are, what NLP is, what large language models are, what they're good at, what they can't do, and basically how we can use those things. That in the broad picture is what I do. Do a lot of testing of software packages, APIs, um, that kind of thing. I don't do a lot of development work or anything like that. I have I do use like coding to augment my workflow and stuff like that. But yeah,
mhm,
that's probably a good summary, I guess.
yeah. So, in this role, do you have to work with mainly other linguists, or do you have to work with tech people as well?
Yeah, I'm in more of the product engineering side, so I work with a lot of the engineers, work with a lot of the just product managers to help them incorporate the technology into platforms, make ideas for how it can be useful, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
So not a lot of linguists. I think might be the only linguist there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then, following up with that question, could you explain how your experience as a humanities person, right, from a background with journalism and linguistics, helped you in the more technical roles, for example, in the one that you are right now? And how do you see the different worlds, humanities versus STEM disciplines, collaborating in the field of NLP?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm pretty adamant about this part. I think to be a really good um, engineer, developer, or NLP practitioner in general, I think it really takes someone with a good understanding of both the humanities side and the STEM side. I mean, the STEM side for obvious reasons. I mean, the technology um, gets more and more, advanced every day. There's a big, computer science component there, like machine learning, coding in whatever language, like Python and data science, like all that is important, but for the best results, it can never be the only piece, I think. And like to have a good like grasp of the humanities, um, and I'm throwing linguistics and the humanities there as well, but linguistics is more of like it's probably the hardest of the social science, I would say. I had a teacher who
Oh,
told me that once, and so like it can be very analytical and stuff, but still like it's important to understand the linguistic and the computer science. That is truly where I think NLP is, and I think many people would agree with me there. Um, and really, that understanding of the humanities is what is important in NLP, especially nowadays with AI. I mean, artificial intelligence. You have to make something that is more human. You need the human component. So I hope that answers your
yeah,
question there.
yeah, yeah. Great.
Um, as for me personally, my background in journalism has been surprisingly relevant in everything that I have had to do. One of the things that I have to do a lot of is, annotating and like analyzing like training data and results from like machine learning models and stuff. And that, especially at Right Label, where we're doing a lot of creative work, has been very important.
Mhm.
A lot of my, skills from journalism, like, don't bury the lead, get a good hook to bring someone into like whatever it is you're writing, that has become very important. Um, and linguistics too. Like I was more of a syntax and semantics guy, but I've used the IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet, like a lot in my work, in machine learning and everything like that. So yeah.
Yeah. That's good. And I think this is also one of the benefits of working in the industry with linguistics. That, for example, while you are in academia, you have to specialize in a very narrowed down field. You don't work with, you can work with phonetics, but you have to work, for example, with consonants, not all consonants. You have to work with nasal consonants, not all
Hmm.
nasal consonants, like two or three of them when you're doing
Hmm.
grad school, for example. But when you are in the industry, whatever project they throw at you, you have to do it. And
Hmm.
you can learn and you can explore different areas, different fields, and different methods as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a flexibility that has to come with it, right? Like,
Hmm.
and you'll be surprised, like what you might take for granted, what you know might seem obvious. You might think everybody is familiar with, how words are made with like sounds and consonants, but to other people, they would just completely wouldn't get that. And yeah, it really is like help us understand this. Like how does this work? Whatever that is, you gotta learn about it. And that it really is the nature of like academia, right? Like we're
Yeah,
specializing in research in a very particular thing to find out a very particular topic versus industries and like okay just just do whatever to help us figure it out.
yeah.
um yeah,
In the industry, is like, I want this result, make it happen.
exactly, exactly. Exactly.
And that can be good, it can be bad. So it
Oh
depends
yeah, yeah,
where
there's
you're
I
at.
mean there's pros and cons with both. That's why some people love to stay in academia, some people go in industry. It just yeah,
It's just different,
pros and cons.
different areas.
Exactly.
Um, and now going back a little bit about your testing, you test softwares and you test machine learning algorithms. So before your current roles as a computational linguist, I've worked as an instructor and a researcher. So how does your background in linguistics enhance your ability to teach and to develop language-related technologies? And teach here, you can think about like machine learning as you're teaching the machine, or you can also think about teaching the engineers, for example, to get used to the linguistic terms and approaches.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the best thing that I learned from being a teacher and leading classes, because I taught Ling 101 at UNC as a research fellow, and I also had some experience before tutoring and also doing a little bit of like ESL
Hmm.
teaching in Spain. And I think the ability to explain complicated things to people who are unfamiliar with them is probably the best, like an underrated skill to have, because it really helps communication. We get a lot of people who don't necessarily know what what this technology is or what have you. Um, Even people who are otherwise very tech savvy. Um, I mean, and that sort of thing. Like if there's something that you understand that someone else doesn't, to be able to explain that to them in a way that is like digestible is is a very important skill, and one I would say I use frequently. And I think that only comes with teaching too. So anybody who teaches can probably say the same.
Yeah, that's great. I totally agree with you. I think not only teaching makes us more didactic with concepts and terms,
Hmm.
so make us be clearer when we are talking, when we are.
Exactly. Hmm.
And sometimes I'm not generalizing, but sometimes tech people, they are not clear on what they want and what they need. And I think when someone who was a teacher, someone who has a linguistic background, with my experience, this doesn't happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good. Yeah, yeah. When you come from that humanities background and linguistics, when you're having to, I don't know if it's the understanding of language or if it's the experience with writing or what it is, but there is definitely a difference between how linguists and everything like that component of communication versus someone who's like strictly coming from like a tech background. And also something else too that I had noticed whenever I was, writing, like papers and a thesis and
Mhm,
stuff like that is when it comes like academic writing, like being able to switch from that very specific, but sometimes not digestible, like academic script back to something that's more, you know, more casual, more communicative.
mhm,
Like that's also an important thing to like learn how to do as well. I've had a lot of like well, not really professors. All my classmates might have, well, I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say here anymore, but I think I think you get my point. Like the academic writing to like
yeah,
more professional writing, that's a shift that's also very
mhm.
important.
It's like a code switching.
Right. It really is like code switching in a way.
Yeah, great. Um, and now I think our viewers will be a little bit more interested in your answer to this question, which is what skills do you consider most essential for someone pursuing a career in computational linguistics, particularly for those who are just starting out their journey in this field?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think so. The question was, what's the most important thing to like for someone who's just starting out their career?
Yeah,
Is that
like
right?
the skill set that they
The
should.
skill set. Um, as far as the skill set, I think obviously like learning, like if you're from the humanities side, if you're from the more, traditional linguistics side, or maybe someone like me with some more like English and journalism, like um, getting some of that, hard STEM, coding experience, math or stats or machine learning experience is very important. It's only becoming more important, really. And even if you don't end up using that in your career every day, it looks good to have that, at least like have an understanding of that.
Hmm.
Science side and you want to work in NLP, very important you learn a lot about linguistics, I think. I think it's very important to understand, linguistics theory, syntax, and semantics. It might help you understand what knowledge graphs are, that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, it really is about, whichever side you're on, coming to that middle. And if you're one of the lucky few who's coming from a university that already has that in mind, is already giving you like a good like
Yeah.
mix of those two, um, then yeah, that's a good spot to be in. The other advice I would give as far as like getting into the industry, is something that is advice that was given to me that I took was, like whatever it is, like find an internship or a fellowship or something that allows you to get actual practical work experience in the industry. Um, like find a way to do that, you know, like sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
Because you can learn and learn about theory, you can read all the books on NLP, read all the research papers, and practice the coding. But when it comes down to it, the best thing to look on a resume or like a CV is to actually have like, an internship, an actual work experience.
Yeah, I agree. Um, and adding to that, I know that not everybody can do what I'm going to say, but you can also offer like a volunteer work to a company.
Hmm.
And then,
Yeah, yeah.
and I did that before having my current role. So uh, you can have like, as you said, a practical experience on what the job is, what it's like to work with a team, both with engineers and linguists, and
Hmm.
so to check with yourself like what you have to learn and what you already know that you have, um, that you, for example, sell yourself as I know this.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know that not everybody can do that because of, we have to pay bills. Not everybody
Yeah,
has the time and the privilege to do a volunteer work, but that's an
yeah, yeah.
option.
Yeah, it's always good. I mean, it's always good to get paid, but if there's, I mean, if like anything helps, also side projects too. I mean, one of the other things, like there's a
Hmm.
non-profit that's trying to get off the ground here in Chapel Hill, and I've been sort of helping them do a little bit of like NLP data science work, like use some simple packages, look at data. Something like that too can be helpful. I mean, anything that says, "Hey, I did a thing," and this is what I did. You can point to it as like
Yeah.
proof. Will help you out leaps and bounds. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Um, my next question would be a little bit about your opinion on the application, the AI applications that are out there.
Hmm.
So, can you share some examples of real-world applications of computational linguistics that you find particularly exciting or impactful?
Yeah. Hmm. I've been reading a lot. So I know everyone, I know you have, and probably everyone who's listening to this has been, like, probably follows like the AI boom a lot on the different AI companies that are coming out. And there's been like like a lot of people who, maybe who don't, it doesn't like worry me as much because, like I work in it, understand it's not, it's not always what like media makes it out to be. But there are some dangers like with deep fakes and stuff like that, probably for more like visual stuff and audio. And
Mm-hmm.
what I'm really like excited to hear is there's been a big kick by a lot of companies to research a lot into like AI, that can sort of, um, like AI that can identify other AI. Like there's one company in particular, and I don't know if I can mention it, because we're actually using it a right label, or looking into it a right label. So it's like companies that are doing things like looking for digital watermarks and stuff on,
Mm-hmm.
artificially generated, content to identify it as made by AI. I think that kind of stuff is really good for like disinformation
Mm-hmm.
and, like tracking down, and that is an area like of computational linguistics, like automatic fact checking, automatic, finding of disinformation. I'm not really sure what the what the correct term for it is right now, but that's like I think a really exciting area for research and also a very like important one, like ethically, because it's very easy for anyone who's less scrupulous to use this type of technology for not really good reasons, not really good uses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really interesting development there.
Yeah, that's
And if
true.
you're looking for something to research, listeners, that's something to check out. So.
Yeah, that's true. Because I think there is a misconception that with AI we can't do everything.
Hmm.
Actually, we can, but we should,
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Because there is
One of the
some.
best classes I took was,
Go on.
sorry, one of the best classes that I took was like ethics with NLP,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And that was one thing they mentioned is like, should we? And like when they're making a technology, you have to consider like the ways in which it could be used for, less than good reasons. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So be careful,
Yeah.
everyone. If you're going to build a software or a company, be careful because we shouldn't do everything.
Yeah.
Great. So now I would like to talk a little bit about your coding experience.
Sure.
Uh, so how does your background or knowledge or skill set in machine learning and in object-oriented programming complement your work in computational linguistics, and how important are these skills in your daily tasks? And then you can mention about your current role or past roles that you had that those skills were important.
Hmm. Yeah. As far as my daily work nowadays, I don't really use much of my object-oriented programming.
Hmm.
Like I don't really do a whole lot of development work. Actually, I don't
Okay.
do any development work right now. I mean, that might change in the future because things are very up in the air. My previous roles, it really did come in handy for, I think with me, like, so I worked previously a fellowship where we did some web development and a lot of the programming development experience, really helped with that. Um, and that's where I got a lot of my experience then. But after that, I've been mostly my coding has been limited to like, making scripts or running like data analysis, that kind of thing. Machine learning as well. Same thing. I've done a little bit of training, a little bit of using scripts to prep data sets, that kind of thing, and access APIs. But most of that, I haven't done a lot of like from grounds up constructing
Hmm.
of like a machine learning model or something like that, because it's just really not as there's a lot of need for people who, I will say, to understand it. Like, I'm glad of the experience that I got previously in my thesis projects and my research, using machine learning, and understanding machine learning in the coursework, because that really, like, it's important to understand things as well. And I do believe that, like, to truly understand things, like, you should still work on it. Like, you should still do it. You should still be doing machine learning. Like, I'm trying to do things on the side to, further increase my skills in that area. But it won't always be an industry, for example, that you're the person necessarily making the software or making the machine learning model. Um, but it's still important to understand. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, you did. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think you mentioned something that is very important, especially for linguists who are starting out their career in the industry or even in academic career as well. I think the basic type of coding that a linguist can learn, at least to start, um, learn the logic and how
Hmm.
work, will be something related to data cleaning, data collection, as you mentioned, for example, some carries with regular expressions.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
those would be like a good start to learn
Yeah.
how to programming, how to code, but
Hmm.
with a project-based approach that
Hmm.
can work with the data that we work at that we work with. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that would be good.
Yeah. So much work is done with that little bit of like regular expressions. I use regular expressions all the time. Um, yeah, I mean, just like that little bit of coding, like you say, like really teaches people a lot. And even if you do want to go on to do like, in like a actual like NLP engineer, like actually making novel technologies like that, it's easy to step up from there. I think the hardest part of probably coding, like for me, was like learning to think like a programmer, and then after that,
Hmm.
everything else is can like build off of each other. Yeah.
And then I have two things to add. The first one is many people have told me that data cleaning is like 80% of the job. So if you
Hmm.
learn data cleaning, because for example, we are as linguists, we know we tend at least to know what is necessary and unnecessary to work with that type of with that machine learning algorithm based on the data that we have. So
Hmm.
can give we can have more insights about what we have to delete and what we have to keep in the
Hmm.
um, so then if you learn data cleaning and pre-processing algorithms, that will be a very good a very good skill to have.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the second one would be regarding the last thing that you said. It took you a while to think as a programmer.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
have said this before in the channel, and I heard it from a colleague. You don't have to. We don't have to be the best programmers or the
Hmm.
best developers, but we have to be the best linguist who codes.
That's a good. That is a good way to put it. I agree 100%. Yeah.
Because then you have to shift your idea. Because, quote, like let's put like not exactly, but we will never be developers like 100%. Because
Hmm.
even computer science was not our first, let's say, our first background. We already
Hmm.
have our humanities background, and we will always go back to that.
Exactly.
And we can um, make be distant from that, let's say. Um,
Hmm.
and then what we learn after that, we will always come back. Oh, how can I, for example, count syllables? How can I count morphemes? How can I count sentences? How can I tokenize words? How can
Hmm.
I tokenize words from English to Arabic, from Korean to Spanish? So that's the kind of questions that we have, but they are very linguistics based. So we are linguists who codes, and then we have
Exactly.
the best linguists who codes that we can be.
Exactly. It's putting the linguistics in the technology, like using the computer science to understand the linguistics
Yeah,
and vice versa. Yeah, that's really good.
and
That's some really good advice.
that's in the name of the role, right? We are computational linguists. So first of
Exactly.
all, we are linguists. Then
Yeah,
we complementary part of computational.
exactly.
That's great. Thank you. Um, so going back to like advice to new people. So what advice would you give to students or professionals who aspire to enter the field of computational linguistics? And do you recommend any specific resources or courses for them?
Yeah, I think I might have jumped the gun then because yeah, I think on a previous question I sort of jumped the gun. Like my biggest advice, at least for someone who wants to be in industry, as I mentioned, was like, find like real work experience. Like find a problem from someone who needs to be solved. If you can get paid for it, even better. If you can't, side projects, incorporate whatever kind of courses, whatever kind of thing that you're doing in your coursework. Find a way to incorporate the computational linguistics side of that, and that'll really pay off. As far as specific courses and stuff. There's honestly just so many resources online. Like I think there's at least for coding and stuff, it's really never been easier to learn like even basic or even very complicated computer science things. Like you can learn there's so many free courses as well, but there's also so many if you want more of like an accreditation for universities, there's so many universities that are offering some type of like certificate or additional coursework and stuff you can take and learn that there like you really just have to I don't know, you really just have to look like if you're looking for that kind of thing. It's yeah, I mean, there's so many resources available. And I think the community for computational linguistics is really there's been a lot of interest lately and it's growing. It's a good time to be in this. So yeah, I guess just other advice is just be active and be persistent and looking for, whatever your interest is in this field, and there's something out there for you. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
good. That's great. That's great. And just making a following up question with that. Um, Can you talk about a little bit about any ongoing trends or developments in the field that, for example, our listeners, our viewers should be aware of, especially in terms of trends that can potentially become a career opportunity or growth, or growth.
Hmm. Yeah. I think I thought a bit about this one, and I think the biggest trend, it's really, I don't know if this is a good answer or not, but it's kind of obvious, but you know, like AI or like large language models are being used now or incorporated into all sorts of things. Like most industries now are looking at a way to incorporate it. I mean, my business, 2 or 3 years ago wasn't like focused on AI to my knowledge. I mean, maybe they were and they didn't tell me, but like, and in such a short time this has happened. If you'd have told me like back in grad school, I'd be working for like a creative writing agency, I
Mhm,
wouldn't have been like, oh, that's cool, but I would not have seen it coming. So, as far as the trends, like if you're looking for ways in which, I mean, let me back up. They say like AI or like large language models, but it really comes like all sorts of other NLP technologies too coming along, like synthetic speech,
mhm,
like automatic transcription, and machine translation, all sorts of interest has been shined on these areas, and there's really going to be there really are a lot of businesses now looking into these, and so I think there will be a lot of opportunities in industries in which people might not have considered to start with.
Mm.
Um, like me, I wanted to go into one day I still will. I wanted to go into like language learning software, but I mean now
Mm.
it's really easy to do that because there's lots of people doing that. But there's also all sorts of other business opportunities. So I would guess the best trend to look out for is just to look in a way, look for industries that might be trying to incorporate, you know,
Mhm.
NLP and AI in ways which haven't been yet. And I think that'll be where a lot of opportunity lies, especially right now.
Yeah, I would add that uh, there are two areas that might become uh, a trend. One of them is already a trend, and you mentioned uh, those technologies related to speech, especially like
Mhm.
recognition, speech translation as well from one language to another, um, transcribers, etc. And then the second trend, I would say, it will be a little bit on more the accessibility and diversity part, would be technologies related to sign languages,
Mhm. Mhm.
because there are some technologies, but they are not well spread. Oops. They are not well spread. They are not, let's say, they are not used already. So, and as everybody knows, there are a lot of sign languages. So,
Oh yeah.
and they have to be adapted as well to each sign languages. And there is,
Mhm.
let's say, an obstacle with sign languages because usually each country has a sign language. Because, for example, there is Spanish. Of course, there is like the European Spanish, the American Spanish, and there is like the Colombian Spanish, Argentinian Spanish, but they are
Mhm.
Spanish speaking people. And then
Mhm.
with sign languages, each country usually has one, and they're very different from each other. So that's an obstacle.
Mhm.
But it can become a trend, or we as linguists can make it a trend from that. So that would,
Yeah, yeah.
that would be
Yeah, that'd
something
be a good
to.
yeah, that'd be a good area of like research for like like PhD. If someone was getting a PhD, like sign language, like sign language systems like that. That's a because that whole visual element adds a like a completely other dimension. That's just
Hmm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. Another thing too, like if I was going to do some research, like finding ways to make like really strong like language models and stuff for like lower resource languages, like smaller languages, like making a I don't know, a chat GPT that's like really good at Scots Gaelic or something like that, like Scottish Gaelic, or Basque, or like a smaller indigenous language. That's another area that I think is going to be really gonna it already has a lot of attention on it, but I think is really only going to be more important,
Mm,
especially if you're interested in like equity and inclusion and stuff like that.
yeah. Yeah. I think this also would be good if you have like some kind of background with anthropology, because sometimes that's what anthropologists do.
Hmm.
You have that with linguistics, that would be super easy for you to do that transition.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, so, Dylan, that was my last question, and then I would like to ask you if you have any final words to the viewers or any final advice for those who are starting out with linguistics, for computational linguistics.
Uh, I would say final advice, just follow what you're interested in, I guess. I think everyone who's got into this field likes the field, but has something particular that they're like really
Mhm.
passionate about. And I think like following that is the best way to really enjoy what you're doing, and also um, I said getting the most out of it and contributing the most as well. So I don't know if that's good
Yeah,
advice. I think it's pretty good advice. So
I
thank you
agree.
for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. So, folks, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. And thank you very much, Dylan. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot from you. I hope the viewers learned as well. And again, thank you for accepting the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I look forward to hearing about the other LangBytes
Okay.
episodes.
So thank you, folks. Bye bye.
Thank you.